I'm delighted to introduce amazing philatelist Dr. Cheryl R. Ganz, RDP from United States of America, and she's currently the president of American Philatelic Society. Cheryl R. Ganz received the PhD in United States history from the University of Illinois at Chicago. She is a Smithsonian Institution Curator Emerita following her retirement as the Chief Curator of Philately at the Smithsonian National Postal Museum and as a lead curator of the William H. Gross Stamp Gallery, the world's largest postage stamp gallery. As a historian, she researched and published social cultural history during the Great Depression. Her interests are travel, reading, film, genealogy, and both urban and rural environments. Her philatelic exhibits, research, writing, and speaking focus on her specialty of Zeppelin, post, and memorabilia worldwide. At the Washington Philatelic Exhibition 2006, she exhibited in the Court of Honor. At the World Stamp Show New York 2016, she received the Best in Class for single frame exhibits, and at CAPEX 22, her exhibit received Best in Class for postcards. At IBRA 2023, her lifelong study of Zeppelin and the United States received large gold. Ganz has signed a Role of Distinguished Philatelist and received many philatelic achievement awards, including Lee, Liechtenstein, Lindbergh, Luff, Ninken, and Smithsonian honors. Thank you, ma'am, for giving us the time, and I request you to take over to through your presentation. Over to you.
Thank you very much. Could someone confirm that you see my screen of my program?
Yes, we can.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Today, I'm going to discuss the FIP Aerophilatelic Guidelines and how I've translated them into my exhibit. And of course, what I have done is not the only way to do it. I hope it inspires you to look at other exhibits and see how different aerophilatelists have taken these same guidelines to find creative ways to show their material. I'm going to today use one of my exhibits as kind of a case study to walk through some of the ideas presented in the guidelines. But I wanted to show you how that exhibit itself has evolved. I've shown it 4 times at the international level, first time with a vermeil and most recently with a large gold. And on the left, you can see my title page from 1997. And on the right, you can see my title page from 2023. I have gone from single page to double page, mostly because I like to show large covers without having to turn them on their side. And I believe the double page offers me a little more flexibility in arrangement. But other than that, I think it's a stark realization how much exhibiting has changed in the last 20 years and how the expectations of both exhibitors and judges have changed when you side by side see the big difference in these 2 title pages for the same exhibit. Now, first thing you must realize is airmail does not automatically mean aerophilately. There are a lot of ways you can show airmail. And so I have shown it in a traditional class. I've shown it in a postal history Marcophily class, in a single frame class, in an open class, in a postcard class, and of course, in an aerophilatelic class. So I want to focus today on that way of thinking about your collection. So just for fun, I made a long list of all the different ways I could have collected Zeppelin mail. And you could do this with any airmail area, whether it's a country, an airline, a type of aircraft. And then on the right, all the different ways you could show that. And so aerophilately isn't the only way, but quite frequently it will be your best way to show off your material. And how do you begin that? And you want to think about what are the strengths of your collection and how can you best tell your story. We are storytellers. And we need to tell our story in a way that's well understood by not just the judges, but our visitors to the shows. The first thing you need to do is go look at the FIP Aerophilatley Commission homepage. And from that homepage, you can go to the guidelines. And I want to thank Norman Banfield, who created these guidelines, taking other documents and combining them for an easy to understand document. When you read these guidelines, it'll make very clear to you what the judges expect to find in your exhibit. So these guidelines are written both for exhibitors and for the judges. In addition, for any show you plan to apply to exhibit, you want to be sure to read whatever guidelines they put online. So you might have more than one guideline to read. I just wanted to highlight the definition of an aerophilatelic exhibit from those guidelines, because it's very important to understand when you're showing airmail, they want to see primarily flown mail. You can show a few things that aren't flown, depends how your storyline is, but primarily flown material. So there are two basic ways to show airmail: the development and operation of airmail services, or airmail stamps and their use in airmail service. Today, I'm going to focus on the first one, development and operation of airmail services. Should you choose to do the other one, you want to look at someone who's done a presentation in this series on traditional philately, because that's where you're going to learn about essay proofs and how to exhibit those. Then after you've done the production elements, you'll come back to my ideas for showing the use of airmail services. Let's start with the title page. Title page is crucial to your entire exhibit. It is what most people will spend time looking at and reading. And believe me, people do not read exhibits. You go to a stamp show, just watch the people walking through the exhibits. They'll stop at the title page, and then as they walk by your exhibit, they'll stop and look at a couple special items. Rare is the person who's going to read everything, and the jury does not have the time to read everything. But they receive your title page in advance, so they will read and study your title page. So the title page has multiple components: the title, your purpose, the background, rarity, references, your plan, and some objects or photographs. And so I'm going to go through those one by one and talk about them. First, your title. You know, don't be too cute. I could have said something like "up ship, flying around the world with Zeppelins." It doesn't explain what the person is going to see. Upship is a jargon term by airship people meaning takeoff. It's cute, but it's not explaining my exhibit. So you need to clearly state what you're doing. Don't have a title so long that it's excessive. And think about what is the most important component in your exhibit. Is it the aircraft, the airline, the country, the time period? And make sure you get those key elements into that title. Your title only appears once in your entire exhibit, and that is on page 1. The purpose. Your statement of purpose is so important. You define your exhibit, you tell the judges what you're going to show, you give them a scope, you're supporting the title. I have probably written this statement of purpose over and over, maybe 20 times until I finally got it nailed. So understand, this is probably the most important sentence you are going to write in your entire exhibit. Let's talk about the background paragraphs. This is the history part that so many of us love. And the biggest mistake I find when I look at aerophilatelic exhibits is they write paragraphs about the history of an airline or the history of an aircraft. They don't write about the post office history or the mail history. So be sure when you're discussing your background information that you're telling a postal story. That's what this is about. This is about telling about the mail. Who, what, when, where, why, how. in a bigger context. And if you notice here, I tell you key factors that make my exhibit important. Zeppelins helped establish various air postal routes. In this exhibit, you're going to find the first regularly scheduled entirely by air postal service between Europe and North America. So you need to state clearly some of the most important things that your exhibit is going to do about airmail in worldwide airmail history. Also, this is a place where you can define terms, which is what I have done with what is a Zeppelin. Rarity. There's so many ways to show rarity. One way is you can put a box with a color outline. That's a very common method used. But I've seen other people do things like alter how they mat covers or put a symbol next to it. Some use color, some don't. But what's really key for a lot of judges on the rarity factor is when you can prove to the judges that you know how rare it is by how many exist. You cannot use the word rare or scarce in your text. Instead, they want you to say one known, one recorded. And the difference between the two is the recorded would be published, for example, in a catalog. And the known would be if you've done census work or other people that you have exchanged research with have done census work. You can't just make up a number. Oh, I don't see this too often, so I think there must be less than 10 known. No, you need to do the work and come up with the census data. And a lot of ways to do that. When I've done census data on a lot of my items, I go through about 40 years of auction catalogs. I look at indexes of journals. I send notes to various other specialists in the field asking for their input. And after I put some really down hard work into this, I can come up with some pretty serious census numbers. Oh, background, I went backwards there. Let's see. Oops, I'm going the wrong way. I see. Hold on. Sorry about that. Here we go. References. At the FIP level, they want references on the title page. Oh, 5 to 7 at most. They should be important. They should be easy for the judges to find them in a philatelic library. You want a consistent style. Now, here is such an important part of your title page, and that's your plan, your organization of the exhibit. You can see it when I've done it on the right, I have what frame each chapter starts in. That makes it a little easy for people to find things. But you want a clear, developed plan. You want balance between your sections. You want logical time frames. So what I've done on mine, if you look at the italicized underlined phrases, precursor, experimental, demonstration, scheduled service to end of era, that is showing how it is the development of airmail in my exhibit. And then within each of those development categories, I list the specific ships, and I'm going to show you the material that supports my argument. Now, when you have that plan, it is carried through on the headings, the running headings on your entire exhibit. So each page has headings. Each chapter section should stand out. So if you look at my top heading, you'll see I've got a colored banner. Different exhibitors have different ways of making that first chapter page stand out. That's another reason why you should go look at other people's exhibits. So on that banner, I use the same language that I used on the title page plan. You do not want to change your language and have the judges find it difficult to find what they're looking for. Then when I go to the second page of that section, I have reduced the amount of text, but I've also graded down so that it's clear it's not the first page, it's part of that chapter. The second line, the first line tells you the name of the airship. The second line tells you what flight will be on this page. And on that very same line over on the far right, it explains what kind of mail from that flight you're going to see in this page. So those are your headings. My friend Liz Heisey says, if you took an exhibit and by mistake dropped it on the floor and all your pages got mixed up, a stranger should be able to pick up your exhibit and put it in order based on these headings. That gives you a little idea how important they are. And then the visuals on that first page. They can be objects, they can be photographs, they can be other items. They're going to draw the viewer in to see. I know some people will have a title page with nothing but text, but I do believe having some kind of visual helps. I happen to put on my title page what I call precursors or forerunners. They kind of are the beginning of my story. But some people will put a very showy item on as a eye catcher. Photograph because it helps set the stage maybe for what you're telling. So think about what would be just an eye-catching, wonderful item to put on your first page. And now I want to talk about after you leave your title page and you go into your exhibit, you have a caption with every object, every cover or postcard you're showing. And that caption must contain certain specific information. How you organize it, how you do your layout is up to you, but I'm going to show you how I chose to do it. So if you take the top left cover and you look at my caption, this is an example of the Shenandoah transcontinental flight. It's drop mail over the city of Los Angeles on the West Coast flight. And then you see that number 37. That's the flight number. The FIP guidelines require that if there are known flight numbers, you should include those with each object. And those come from printed publications. For example, in my own book, I have charts that give you all the flight numbers of US airships. The Seeger catalog for Zeppelins, German Zeppelins also gives flight numbers, but I know in other airmail fields, you will find logbooks and publications that you can find flight numbers, and that's part of your secondary research to do. Following the flight number, I have the route, San Diego to Camp Lewis, Washington, and that's followed by the date. So in every single item I show in the entire exhibit, the first portion of my caption gives this information. That means once the jury has figured that out by looking at one item, they can go to any item I have and know exactly where they can find the flight, the route, and the date. My second half of my caption gives some additional information. Here I happen to tell you who was on board and wrote the card. And it gives, if I know it, a rarity factor. This is one of two known. And research. If I've published the research, I have a little book that shows a symbol that I have published original research on this specific item. You will note on this page, I have only bolded in the captions the last line. And why did I choose to do that? I did that because the eye will be drawn to that. The jury will immediately see that these are extremely rare items, which is what I want them to take home with them in their thinking. I also, if you note, I have a map on this page. You can add maps, photographs, postcards, reproduction of markings, but they should be small and you should be judicious in how often you use them. If you have an 8-frame exhibit and you show 18 photographs and postcards, that means you have reduced your exhibit by a half a frame of showing material. So be very judicious in what you show and how. And also those items must tie to your story. Excuse me. You don't want to show a picture postcard of the kitchen on the Graf Zeppelin. It has absolutely nothing to do with the postal development of airship mail. So make sure your postcard is specifically tied to the story you're telling. Here I have Graf Zeppelin, Pan American flight, and mail dispatches from the United States. The 3 Zeppelin stamps issued in 1930 for this flight are pretty well known. So I have chosen only to show one page, 4 items, when in fact I could have shown many pages. But what I do is I show the highest rates, the rarest rates, the iconic items like upper left where you have the full set on a first day cover. Below it in the lower right, a combination with a German stamp, and one of them happens to have a plate variety. So if you're showing the best of this dispatch possible, the jury understands that you have some of the more common items. You don't have to show every single one of them. This page is showing mixed frankings. The interesting thing when you have mixed frankings is the rate books aren't going to always show you those. So what you have to do is you have to look at the published rates, maybe for the United States here, and then you have to find published rates for the other countries. You have to figure out, was this added combination because it was trying to get to the United States to join the Zeppelin flight, or did this have an extension to travel somewhere after the Zeppelin flight? Was it reposted or part of a continuous flight? Is it the exact rate combination? Is it overfranked, underfranked, or an educated guess? So all of this is part of your challenge in showing your philatelic knowledge. For the Hindenburg North America flights, published rates for the United States are pretty easy to find, and for Germany. But now finding the rates and the routes for some more obscure locations is more of a challenge. One thing you should do, for me, I'm an English speaker. So when I look at a couple of these covers and I see handwriting in a language I don't know, I immediately go to a philatelic collector of one of those countries. And I say, can you tell me what this says? Can you translate this for me? In many cases, it is simply repeating the directional marking, via Hindenburg, or it might be the post office has put the person's name on it in their home language, but you need to know what that foreign language says in case it's something vital that contributes to the story of the cover. And then a lot of countries have published books with all their rates in them, but I would say the majority of countries in the world do not. And sometimes, even if you find published rates, you aren't going to find Zeppelin cover mail rates. So for example, the bottom cover is from Turkey. From my APS library, I got photocopies of the Turkish airmail rates. None of these airmail rates applied to this cover. So then I looked up the specialty society, the Ottoman and Far East Philatelic Society. I wrote to a contact there, sent a copy of the cover. He shared the cover with a couple of other people. They all wrote back to me. By the time we had had a nice email discussion, I not only understood the rate, but I understood the routing. And so use your entire philatelic network of people you can contact in a variety of ways to help you find these rates that aren't already published. It is essential to have rates with all your covers in an aerophilatelic exhibit. This is from the Graf Zeppelin First North America flight. This is drop mail. And I wanted here to show you the rarity factor in the difference between known and recorded mail. So the bottom two items are recorded. Those numbers are established in published catalogs, and that can come from postal documents that have been published, or dealers who have worked with the Zeppelin company like Seeger to get the exact numbers, and so those are recorded. The others we're looking at known, and known comes from census work. In some cases, the census work is not authoritative enough to give an exact number, and I have gone few known. I am, when I say few known, I'm pretty positive it's 10 or less, but I'm not going to give a number I don't know. In the case of the top cover in the middle, there are more than 10 covers dropped over Basel, but there are only 10 known fractional rubber stamps from Basel. You see that 33 1/3? So what I'm actually doing when I'm talking about the 10 known there is I'm talking about the Basel fractional text marking. Since I created this page, I have co-authored an article on those fractional markings in Basel, And it turns out this is the only Zeppelin cover with a fractional marking. So, and I have now published, co-authored that article about this, so I'll be able to now enhance that description even more. But a fun thing about this page is not only am I showing drop mail, I'm telling a story of postage dues on drop mail. I mean, at the top left, you have a cover that's properly franked, it doesn't need postage dues. But then you have several covers where you have a variety of postage due markings, and everything from rubber stamp to hand drawn with crayon to postage due stamps. And in the lower left, you even have one where the stamp soaked off because the mail bag ended up in the water. So you have a marking that more or less says the stamp fell off, and so you don't charge it postage due. So here's a way of taking your airmail covers and adding a more interesting story behind the philately. An important debated discussion in aerophilatelic material is it commercial or is it contrived? Was it really sent for purposes necessary to use the mail, or did a stamp collector, a dealer, create the envelope and put it on the piece of aircraft as a documentation that a flight took place? In fact, at the FIP level, you shouldn't be showing first flight covers if commercial mail exists. You can show a contrived item if nothing else is available. But often what I do with contrived material is I look for the ones that look the least contrived. So I'll try to avoid anything addressed to Herman Seeger or one of the major dealers. In this case, I'm showing 3 commercial items on this page. And commercial items are very clear. It's usually business to business. It might be family correspondence from a family member in one country to someone in another country. It could be advertising. It could be something sent by a passenger or crew member on board. So there are a variety of types of commercial mail as well. You can get a good variety of material by looking at where is this dispatched from. You can have variety of countries, but you can also have destinations, because there are countries where there's no mail sent on Zeppelins, but there are destinations where mail's been delivered to that country. Another thing you're allowed to show, in limited amounts, I would say, is mail intended to be flown that wasn't flown. So in the bottom right corner, I have a letter that was Dutch East Indies, but because there was insufficient postage, once it got to Europe, it didn't go by Zeppelin, it went by sea mail. There are other reasons intended mail won't be go by Zeppelin in my case. I have one from North Africa that in Marseille was redirected through France to go by ship because it would have been delayed getting on a Zeppelin, and they figured the ship would get it there faster. In another intended cover, it was supposed to go back on the Hindenburg. The Hindenburg crashed and had a disaster. Obviously, it couldn't fly mail back, and so it had to go sea mail. So there are a variety of ways you can show intended mail, and you still need to talk about rates, even if it's intended. You know, airmail rates are pretty straightforward, postcard and envelope or letter rate, but what you should really do is seek out varieties to the rates, and that could be printed matter, could be parcel post, it could be business matter. There are rate charts from Germany and the United States that list all the varieties of rates you could possibly have. So in this case, I show one of 3 known parcel posts. I've been doing a census on those items for over 20 years, and pleased to say very few have shown up. And then at right, what I have is a quadruple rate tag that was attached to a package that had live queen bees inside. So the advantage of these unusual rate items is that they also add variety to the look of your pages. One of the criticisms often on airmail exhibits is it looks like railroad tracks. If all your envelopes are the same size and color, and you stand and you look at the exhibit, it's just rows and rows that are identical, and there's no variety and interest level to the pages. And when you can change the shapes and colors and textures of what you're showing, you'll find that when you stand back from an exhibit, these are the first things the eyes are drawn to. So there are some flights that are pretty common. And the question is, if you have a really common item, how can you upgrade it in a way that makes it better for showing at the FIP level? And this is a particular flight by the U.S. Airship Akron. And the flight itself, you can buy a cover for the price of an inexpensive lunch. But what I have done is I've shown varieties of this flight that enhance the flight. And so I'm looking at who sent it, or was it sent to? Did it come from a different country? Is there an illegal overprint on one of the stamps? And in the bottom right, I actually have one of the baggage tags that was attached to the mail bag. So I've tried to find different ways to tell the story about this flight. And what's really important is that you're not just repeating the same thing over and over. You don't want duplicative, but each item tells a different element to the story of making up this flight. When you've done original research, and of course, secondary research is when you're taking already published catalogs and information and using that, and that's really important. But if you've done actual original research and discovery research, and you've gone to archives, you certainly want to emphasize that. And this is one of mine that I'm proud of. What I wrote, the article of my discovery in the London Philatelist, is the Hindenburg had a pneumatic tube on board. And that pneumatic tube was used to send radio telegrams between the radio room and the chief steward's office, so that passengers could have access to sending and receiving telegrams. What happened when a passenger would receive a telegram is a steward would carry it over to one of the lounge rooms and hand it to the passenger. They would rip open the carrier envelope and read their telegram, and they'd keep the telegram, but because the steward did not want litter in the public spaces, he would take that discarded envelope immediately and get rid of it. And this is the only known to date surviving carrier that was actually used aboard Hindenburg to deliver a telegram. And so I'm very proud of that. When you've done this kind of original research, you also want to make sure you emphasize that in your synopsis. So how do the judges look at your exhibit in Aerophilatley? And this is the point breakdown. I'm just going to talk a minute, review some of these things, which I've already discussed, but now put them into the categories the way a judge looks. So let's talk treatment. Treatment is that plan that was so important on the title page. How have you organized your exhibit? Is there balance between things? What is the scope of each section? And then in your captions, how are you integrating your rates and routes and markings to tell this story? So all of that falls under treatment. Importance is kind of a subjective item, but it's how important is your specific study to its own field. So in other words, how important is Zeppelins in the United States to all of Zeppelin airmail? And then how is this important to all of airmail from the beginning to today? And there does seem to be a preference toward more pioneer periods than more recent periods. There is more preference to a wider scope than a very narrow scope. Make sure you're not creating a narrow scope just to leave out important things. And they look at this, and it is about, is this a major contribution to the world of airmail? And so if you remember, when I had my title page and I showed you where I wrote my background, I put in my background several key factors of why Zeppelins were important to airmail in general, establishing routes, establishing first regular service, and so forth. So you want to make sure you have that very visible. Look at knowledge and research, 35 points. This is all that rates and routes and flight numbers and all that information that you're absolutely have to have with each caption. And then original research, like I showed, when you have discovery items. And if you've written the book, you know, you want your own book on the title page. In your synopsis, you want to emphasize. So if I've written over 100 articles that have been primary research for a lot of these things that I'm writing, you know, I can't list all 100, but I certainly in my synopsis can talk about what archives I've visited and what publications my articles have been in. Condition, you want to have the best condition possible. Of course, there are cases where Hindenburg crash mail is going to be burnt around the edges, but even within that, there are better condition and poorer condition items. Rarity, we've talked about, you must show number known if possible. Key is if you have really rare items like 10 or less, you want to make sure you show those off. And presentation, you know, that's the overall look of your page and your entire exhibit. So don't just look at your page, stand back, look at a frame, and look at your entire exhibit and see how you feel about the overall impression. So a few of my final tips. I've expressed several tips throughout, like please go look at other exhibits, not just in airmail, but everywhere else to see the creative ways that people have shown their material. You really want to create an exhibit that makes it easy for the jury and the visitor to understand and follow without their having to read every word. They will read if they want to, or if they have time to, but your material should jump out at them and they should be able to still get a great impression without reading every word. A synopsis, and I haven't gone into a lot of detail in this talk on a synopsis, but usually you can write a separate document for the jury that addresses those 6 elements of judging. And this is where you can tell the jury all the things that you can't say on the page for your exhibit. So you can't use the word rare and scarce in your exhibit, but you can talk about that on your synopsis. If you go to an FIP show, you can sign up usually for an in-person critique with one or more of the jury. Please do that. They will give you insights in person that you won't get otherwise. So for example, at one show, one of my judges pointed to one of my covers where I had a rate, but he said I could tease out more elements within that rate. So for example, if you've got a registered cover that connects between 2 airlines, you have multiple rates coming up with that total rate, and how you can tease that out to tell your route and rate story makes it better. And I got that one cover information from one of my judges. Study your award point breakdown. And after the jury gives you an award, they give you a total amount, and your commissioner or you can get your point breakdown. And that'll point out to you the areas that the jury thought you might be weaker or stronger. And that'll help you think about what you need to do next. Know in advance and just plan on, you are going to remount and retweak pages over and over between exhibitions. The first time you exhibit, just know you're going to have to remount the whole thing. Don't even think twice about it. And it's how you get better and better, is by reworking your pages. And finally, this is our hobby. This is about having fun, and you should take pride in your accomplishment. You will have a lot more fun if you connect with other aerophilatelists to share your ideas, your research information, your joys. Enjoy whatever award you receive, but more important to me is remember the rewards. By putting this exhibit together, you figured out what were your gaps, you got new information, you found new sources of research, you met new friends, you traveled maybe to new countries. The rewards really way outweigh the award. It's all fun though. Take pictures, have fun, and thank you very much for your attention.
Well, Cheryl, thank you very much for a very insightful presentation. I certainly learned a lot from listening to you. That said, let me just start right off with the questions posted right here. The first one is, let me just roll it up a little bit.
Meanwhile, Sandeep, I would also request from all one, please share your video so we can take those pictures and video. Yeah, Sandeep, please go ahead.
So, Brandon, what do you want? You want everybody to have their video on?
Correct. That's
Okay,
right.
sure. All right, wonderful. So the first question I have is from Pulak Gupta. An Aerophilatley exhibit should it be organized by date or should it be organized by categories of different events? What do you advise? You're muted, Cheryl. I'm sorry. Can you unmute yourself, please?
Oh, thank you. So it really depends on your subject matter. If you can go a variety of ways of organizing geographically, chronologically, by aircraft or airline. In mine, it's basically chronological, but there's always overlap. So where one aircraft starts, another one is starting before the other finishes. So mine is more a general chronological, but I don't see that as a problem. I think if I had mixed everything exactly chronological, people would be jumping all over and confused. So I really think you have to understand how can you create a plan that makes it easy to follow for everyone, and that the storytelling you're doing is not destroyed by a plan.
Great. Thank you very much. The next question is from Nand Kishore Agarwal. He writes, letters damaged in air crash, can they be included in Aerophilatley?
Yes, actually, Aerophilatley has a lot of things. Crash mail is certainly one of them, and people get pretty excited. It's the, when you walk down a frame of airmail exhibits, the crash mail is something everyone's drawn to. But for example, you can also exhibit a leaflet thrown out of an airplane, maybe no stamp, no postmark, but it still was conveyed by airmail, pigeon mail, all kinds of aviation types of mail are included. So yes, in those FIP guidelines, you'll see lists of different types of mail that you can show.
Great, thank you. The next question is from Mohan Chandran Nair. He writes, can we include postal notes on new routes, rates, etc. in Aerophilatley?
I'm not sure what he means by postal notes, meaning something
postal
for
notices.
the post office?
Yes,
Oh,
postal notices issued by, yes.
Yeah, okay,
That's what I
postal
said, right.
notices. I would use those very sparingly. If you wanted to use one postal notice because it highlighted something really significant that adds to the importance element, after that, you can quote from them within the body of your text. So, for example, I have a cover that has a special label on it that refers to this was returned to sender because of postal notice number such and such. I don't show that postal notice, but what I do is I quote from that postal notice why it's relevant. So I think you can, because a postal notice isn't flown, you don't want to show too much.
Can I please request everybody to mute themselves? Thank you. Sorry about that, Cheryl.
Oh, no, that's fine. Yeah.
I guess the next question has just been, and you've already answered that, can materials drop from airplanes be included? And of course, the answer was yes. The next question is from Jagannath Mani. He writes, Madam, can we exhibit date, again, the same thing, date-wise or states-wise? So I think you already answered that question, that it's really up to them to decide what sort of flow they want to use.
I really think this idea of looking at your material and where your strengths are and what is the story you want to tell and how you develop that story. This is the creative process. I mean, what we're doing, you don't want every single exhibit to look exactly the same. You're putting your personality, your knowledge, your mark on this exhibit by the way you develop this plan. And for me, developing the plan is the most creative part and the most exciting, conceptualizing what I want to do. Have fun with it.
Great. Thank you. With that, That's the end of all the questions. Again, Cheryl, thank you so much for taking the time out and educating all of us. Pratisad, over to you.
Thanks for your wonderful presentation. This is a small token of appreciation from Philatelic Congress of India.